Well over a year ago, Mahindra and Mahindra recast roles of senior officials and created a new position of a CEO for the automotive business as it sharpened its focus on the existing ICE-powered SUV operations and charted a path for the emerging electric SUV portfolio. Nalinikanth took charge of the automotive business as CEO at a time of great opportunity and challenges for the auto sector in India. On this episode of Media Dialogues with Storyboard18, we will get his insights on how he plans to take Mahindra's iconic SUV brands on an accelerated growth path. Hello and welcome to CNBC TV18. Nal, it's lovely to have you here today.
Thank you for joining us here, Delshad.
So let me just begin immediately by dialing back a little bit. It's been now, over 18 months since you joined in this newly created role at Mahindra. So tell me a little bit about some of the goals that you set for yourself at that point in time and how far along are you in that journey?
Yeah, of course. So when I joined, I was new to the auto industry. Let's start with that. So obviously I had to learn the category, I had to learn the business. But really the good thing was all of the brands were in good traction. We had just come off 3 mega launches. The Thar had launched a couple of years back. We had the 700 and we had the Scorpio and just a year before that. So good traction. So the question was keep the momentum going from a brand perspective. But also we were also just coming off this whole supply chain challenges. And so the volume scale up was critical for us. The brands were in demand, but we had to get the volumes up and also get ready for a couple of launches. So focus was primarily for the first 6 months was on production scale up. We were exiting F23 at 39K volume on the UVs, production capacity. We had to take it to 49, which we did end of this year, end of F24. This year we'll take it to about 64 and then 72. So you can imagine just around COVID time, we were at 19K capacity. And from there to where we want to go in 3 years, it's been a phenomenal journey from a capacity perspective. And of course, had to get the launches going. We had 2 big launches coming up at that point in time. One happened in April, which is our 3XO launch, which is a sub 4 meter UV space. And then of course the Thar, which happened in August as well, which was a big one for us. So that was really what it is. It's just keep the momentum going, get the production scale up done and get the launches in place.
Well-established players as well as some of the newer brands in the SUV space are doing pretty well. There is a widening and deepening of the SUV market in the country, like you mentioned also previously. If you could just give me, what is the crux of your strategy to stay ahead of the game, ahead of the competition, as well as just keeping pace with the changes on the consumer side?
Firstly, our fundamental DNA is in making authentic yet sophisticated SUVs. And that's been our DNA since the Scorpio times. We talked about it a bit earlier as well. And as long as we stay true to the DNA and we're crafting vehicles very much in that space on authentic and sophisticated SUVs, I think we're in good shape. Now that can manifest itself in different ways across the different brands that we have, and we can spend some time talking about it. But as long as we're staying true to that, it'll help. And there's some 4 or 5 axes we look at. One is around design, the other is around performance, then you have safety, then you have sci-fi or high-tech, whichever way you want to call it to that extent. And if you look at these categories and we stay over-indexed on each of these and be on top of the game, I think we're confident that we can stay on top of the overall category itself, right? And the interesting thing is if you look at it, 2/3 of the vehicles now sold in India, 4-wheelers, are SUVs. We're at about 66% or so, which just about a couple of years back used to be about 30-40%. So clearly the tailwind is there. The question is, can you make distinctive products? And that's where this whole being authentic in terms of the kind of SUVs make is critical.
Which are the star brands in the portfolio and how have you, whether it's on product development, design, brand, what has worked for these brands?
Yeah. So we'd like to think each and every one of our brands are very star brands.
It's like
sense.
asking you to choose, who's
Exactly.
your favorite child.
But the nice thing is each one means something different for our customers to that extent. We would like to think the 4 star brands which are already there, and there's a 5th one which is about to come out, and we'll talk about that as well. So the first one, of course, is Bolero, which has its own authentic space in the market. Center of gravity is a little bit more on the rural side.
Right.
But we have 2 products in that. We have Bolero Classic and we have the Bolero Neo to that extent. So that's one piece of it. Then we have the Thar with the 3-door, and now we've added a Rocks to it as well, which is the larger version of it. So we have that. Then you have the Scorpio, which has two again. Scorpio Classic is there, Scorpio N, both of them doing extremely well. And you have the XUV family, 700, and then 3XO got added. The fifth star in the making is the Born Electric vehicles, which you should see in a couple of quarters from now. And each one of them, like I said, is quite distinctive in what they offer to customers. And that to us is how we cover the market overall. A lot of people think of it in terms of the size of the vehicle, the length of the vehicle, the engine capacity, or to some extent even the price range. Funnily enough, we actually have overlaps all across the space. So if you take the typical brand book, this is not exactly how you do it, but because each one has its own distinctive place in terms of what the customer is looking for, we're able to thrive in the market.
We've seen, of course, this premiumization from Mahindra. What is your strategy on a brand like Thar? And now with the Rocks, what are you thinking about? What are your marketing plans? How are you positioning the brand in the portfolio?
Yeah. So if you step back and look at it, Thar 3-door, if you look at it, fundamentally it's an authentic off-roader vehicle. Very tough. Probably lacking a little bit on the sophistication in some ways and comfort in some ways. So you go back to the axis I talked about. It's about head-turning design. That's a tick mark. You got that going for it. Then you have spirited performance. You got that going for it. Very strong engine, very strong performance from that perspective. Then you have other elements in terms of tech and sci-fi. Didn't really have a lot of that, and we had to bring that into that extent, right? Safety, good safety, but can we take it to the next level, right? So these are some of the elements if you look at it. And then when we started to think about Thar Rocks, our aspiration was to really start to over-index on each one of these axes and get there, right? And that's what Rocks looks for you. Rocks looks at safety. You have airbags, all the airbags that you need. You have 360 camera from that perspective. Then from a sophistication perspective, the kind of things we have added to the product, the tech we have added, ADAS as a capability we have added to the product. And so it's not just adding 2 doors and making the length of the car longer, but really bringing all the sophisticated elements we can bring in. And that's what the Rock stands for.
So who is the Rocks customer? I wanted to sort of ask you, dig a little bit into what insights you are gathering on the Indian SUV customer. And specifically for a brand like Thar and Thar Rocks, who are you selling to?
Yeah. It's a tough one to answer. The kind of love we've gotten for the brand so far is truly humbling. I was just looking at the stats. We've crossed 1 billion views on all the different reviews which have happened overall, right? And that's not what you see for a car launch, and just about a month out from the launch to that extent. I'll attempt an answer to the question. The way to think about it is really for somebody who wants to live their life boldly, somebody who wants to explore the impossible, which is a brand statement. And that's what we look at it. And that could be anybody. That could be somebody in a rural environment. And that could be somebody who's a CEO and wants a second car to take it into the mountains on a weekend. It could be, I'll give you an account of an example of a mother who just bought it for her, the 3-door in this case, for her daughter who just graduated, and saying that this is to let her live her life boldly, right? And so we've had a really wide spectrum of customers coming in and buying it as well. So it's hard to say which one it is, but if you had embodied the spirit of adventure, the spirit of living their life boldly.
Nal, you've got brand ambassadors on board, you've got celebrities on board. Of course, you're doing, Mahindra has always been very, forward on building experiences and communities. Going forward, for instance, let's speak about the Thar Rocks. How are you thinking about that experience piece as well? And when it comes to, ATL or digital, how is your media skewed going forward?
Yeah, so I think it's a very much of an omni-channel strategy for us. But at the core of it, it's a lifestyle SUV,
yes,
right? It can off-road. And so when we're looking at our ATL and BTL, we are really trying to look at it from a lifestyle perspective and showcase the lifestyle aspect of it across all of the different media channels to that extent. And of course, there's off-road capabilities which we'll showcase as well. But really, we are more talking about the lifestyle aspect of the vehicle when we go out there.
I think what a brand like Scorpio did is, in a sense, make the idea of driving an SUV not just about an off-roading experience, right? And especially for a lot of women. Now, are you getting any specific insights on the Thar from women? I mean, I've tracked what Mahindra has been doing in terms of building these experiences, and the Scorpio has been known to have a lot of women customers. Are you seeing something similar with the Thar? What are some of the fresh insights that you've gathered that are informing your strategies on these new launches?
Yeah, so absolutely. So a couple of things to talk about. And women, I'm glad you brought it up. Traditionally, it's been an area where we haven't had as much traction. Traditionally, we used to have probably about 8-9% of our customers were women with decision makers to that extent. As we are bringing these new products in, we are coming closer to the 15% range, right? And which is quite helpful. And the key to that is balancing between toughness and getting comfort in there. Safety becomes a critical aspect as well. And what we define as safety could mean very different things for different people. For example, airbags is something people traditionally talk about. But when we got 360 camera in for the vehicle, in our heads it was tech. But what we heard from the customers, especially women customers, it's safety actually. It's a large vehicle, I'm backing up, I want to know that I'm parking it safely, there isn't anybody behind. So different nuances of what that looks like, and talking about it when the customer comes in is what we talk about. But also we look at, from an adventure perspective, we have a franchise called Mahindra Adventure, which actually goes on long drives, 2-day drives, 5-day drives. And we have now started to create women-only drives out there. And we had one really good one going to Zanskar up in Ladakh as well, and a phenomenal success. And so we are doing some of that where we get women in and it's women-only drive.
Of course, a lot of action in the EV space, a lot of buzz around a lot of companies and their plans and brands. Tell me how, we spoke briefly about the idea of born electric. Now, some of your competitors, Tata Motors, has some of its star brands that are doing fairly well on the EV front in SUVs. Maruti, which was criticized for being a little late to the EV party, has accelerated some of its plans in the EV SUV space. Where is Mahindra positioned on that front? How far along are you in that growth plan that you've charted out?
Yeah. So about 3 years ago, we kind of laid out what our EV portfolio would look like, our born electric portfolio will look like, right? But before we go there, we already have products in the EV space. We have the XUV 400, which is there. And then we have the 3XO EV, which should be coming out very soon as well. But the clear distinction is those are not born electric vehicles. We've basically taken an ICE vehicle, an ICE proposition, and we have made an EV out of it. And of course, it works well for a specific segment, but you're not truly tapping into the potential of what a born electric can give you. And when you go back and have a clean sheet of paper and you start a brand new architecture, you can truly leverage what an EV gives you in terms of capabilities, and that's what the born electric portfolio will get us. We have announced 3 distinct products. We have a couple more, but 3 clear ones. We have BE05, we have E9, and we have E8 coming out as well. And all of these are built on an in-glow platform, which is a skateboard, which is uniform across all 3 of them with different top hats to that extent, and taps into what an EV can do, a born electric can do, right? And that we think is critical, which is create a lifestyle vehicle, which gives you across the DNA that I talked about of UVs, which by the way happens to be an EV, but you're not buying it to be EV, you're buying it because it's giving you all those kick-ass capabilities.
Right, right. A nuance here, right, between your traditional ICE vehicle SUV consumer and the EV SUV consumer. What are you noticing there? Are there some insights that are driving your plans and your strategies? Are they different? I mean, that migration from, because let's face it, there's a reason why people go in for SUVs, the traditional idea of an SUV, for instance. What are you noticing in terms of any divergent or converging insights between these two?
Yeah, so probably a little bit controversial to look at it and talk about it. I think if you go have a conversation with the customer and ask what you want in an EV, the answer is they're going to get is going to be very much rooted in their ICE experience. And then they're going to say that I want this and this because I'm getting that in ICE to that extent. And by the way, I want these 2 things to that extent, right? You get a little bit of an incremental answer to that extent. And that's the reason why when we do the born electric, of course, we're keeping the customer core to what we're doing. but we are truly starting to explore different dimensions. What kind of hard thumping acceleration can I give because it's an EV, which I won't be able to do with an ICE, for example, right? You go ask a customer, he's not going to tell you that to the extent, right? So I think that's what it is. We go back to the authentic SUV, yet sophisticated, and look at it, performance, design, and each of the elements I talked about earlier, and say that in each of this, what can I do differently because it's an EV? And we're able to come up with a very bold design, which you see if you see the BE05 vehicle, we put out some of the concept cars out there as well, and you'd see that. And that's the reason I'm saying that we don't want to go ask and say that, what do you want? They're going to tell you something which is incremental. We're going to come up with a value proposition which is going to be so new in the EV space. Exactly what we have done when we brought out the Thar, when we brought out the Scorpio. We did things which a customer wouldn't have naturally asked for.
Now let me ask you this, what challenges do you foresee in this journey to bring that DNA of building authentic SUVs to the electric portfolio with SUVs?
Yeah. So there's a few. First, obviously, the ecosystem is to be built on EV vehicles. It's a very nascent industry right now in India. So we have to work with a ton of partners to kind of bring it all together. Of course, we have an experience of doing that on the UV space, on the ICE UV space, but we've got to start to rebuild that on the on this side as well, on the EV side. But I think the second thing is around getting the consumer to move over, right? You're right, it's a new category, right? Before they come and select a Mahindra EV, they have to make a choice between coming into an EV to that extent, right, as a category. So there's a few things we are looking at. One, let me step back 3 years or 4 years back, right? And for me, it's easy to remember there's two A's, two B's, and two C's, and I'll talk about all of those. First is, as an automobile category, the cost of buying an EV is higher, used to be higher to that extent. So we need to get to a point of parity, and we're getting pretty close to that at this point in time. Second is just the novelty of the category of an automobile and EV, right? How should I think about the vehicle? And can I take it into water? There's just all these questions, basic questions, which you don't think about when you're on ICE, right? That's the two A's if I were to talk about automobile category. Then the two B's is around the battery, right? It's about battery life. It's about battery resale value and how it drives the resale value of the vehicle, and those are that. And then, of course, the two C's for me is about charging. And people talk about range anxiety. We think of it as charging anxiety. It's not really the range you're worried about. You're worried about where can I go charge next, and that's the anxiety you get. And charging accessibility, especially in large cities like Mumbai. And so charging for us is anxiety and accessibility. Accessibility is, I'm at home, I need a charger in my complex. It's taking too much time. People are not approving a charger being put out there. So you think about accessibility and you think about the anxiety when you're out, driving out on the highways as well, right? So those are the six big ones. Some of this is already solved for. I think the vehicle parity, cost parity is starting to come thanks to some of the GST incentives the government is giving out there. Largely the category insecurity, if I may call that, in terms of going into water and all of this starts to get solved for. And we're coming with innovative models as an industry around the battery, right? You've seen the recent work done by some of the other OEMs around providing battery as a service. I think it's a unique way of looking at the market and targeting the market as well, right? So we have to kind of get the customers to get there. And what we have seen is anytime such a change happens, you don't have to get all your parameters on your side. You get 3 or 4 out of the 5 concerns out there. But if your core value proposition on the vehicle is so compelling, they say, you know what, that's great. It's a born electric. It's giving me such dividend terms in terms of what the vehicle design is. I'm willing to live with 1 or 2 constraints, right? And that's what we saw with the 3-door Thar. And that's what we're hoping that we'll be able to the born electric vehicle as well.
Do you drive an electric vehicle?
Not yet, not yet. I'm waiting for the BEVs to come out, and then, so we have one car which is a 700 at this point in time. Honestly speaking, we need 2 cars, but I've so far convinced my family to wait till the BEVs come out.
So traditionally, what have been certain barriers for, the ICE SUV portfolio, and are these sort of migrating also to the similar issues in the EV portfolio that you're seeing in terms of pricing barriers? What are people thinking about when they think about pricing and cost?
Yeah. So on a lighter note, let's go back about 10-15 years. I remember an ad by one of the OEMs. The entire ad campaign was built around "Kitna deti hai."
Yes.
Right? If you remember that
Iconic
series of
ad.
ads. Yeah. And it was all about fuel efficiency at that point in time, right? And if you look at the Indian consumer, they've obviously become a lot more sophisticated, and they are asking for a lot. But the kitna deti hai mindset is still very much there. It's just not about fuel efficiency yet. It's about a lot more other things. If I'm putting this kind of money in there, it's about kitna deti hai on sophistication, on tech, on safety, on design, on performance. It's all of these elements to the resistance, right? So when we think about pricing, for us, we are looking at each of these aspects and saying, what of this can I work on and put a value proposition together for which the customer is willing to pay for, right? Some of this is uniformly important and universal. Safety, for example. So if your 3XO launch, if you see, we've had 6 airbags from the base model, right? We're not compromising on safety to that extent. And so you have airbags across all of these. But then as we start to put different variants in there at different price points, we're bringing different aspects to it, right? Like one insight for us was an urban customer wants an authentic automatic vehicle at an accessible price point. So we get a variant which is sub 10 lakhs, which is an automatic SUV, an AT SUV, which is not something which the industry has to that extent. That's an insight, right? And they're willing to pay for that to that extent. And then you have a connected car, which we start to bring in. And that becomes a critical element because a lot of people wanted a connected car experience as well, right? And what are the price point around that overall? So if you think through these, then you get this varianting strategy and the pricing. But again, going back to the same kitna deti hai, but across all of these elements instead of just fuel efficiency.
Given that you don't come from an auto background, what are some of the learnings that you've gathered in your previous experiences that you've applied here?
Of course. I think there's a phrase which says software is eating the world in some ways. And I think that's something which is transforming the auto industry as we speak. So the concept of a software-defined vehicle is very much here, right? And I'll give you an example. All of our connected cars today, if you need to make certain updates to it, you can do it like you do on your mobile phone. It's over the air. You just have to authorize it and it downloads it and makes it. And you get new features added to it. You need tweaks to the performance of the vehicle, right? But that's just tip of the iceberg on what you can do, right? So software is going to be a critical part of the transformation for this journey to that extent. I think the second one is this whole EV transformation. And it's going to be a huge one. I know there's a lot of talk around when the transition will happen. The funny part is when it happens, it'll be rapid and fast because the excuses are out of the window. And then suddenly what the Born Electric can give you are going to so much outweigh some of the other challenges you're going to have. And so that hockey stick is something generally people are not used to. I've seen that happen in the digital world in Silicon Valley. I've seen that happen in the healthcare world with digital. And I think we are not very far from that inflection point on the EVs as well.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
It was a fascinating conversation and lovely chatting with you.